Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist turned entrepreneur, Darwyn Metzger. So welcome, Darwyn.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So Darwyn, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you share with us how your journalistic and entrepreneurial journey started?
Sure. So I would say my entrepreneurial journey probably started as a young child selling Italian sodas by the roadside.
Oh, wow.
So I've been in that field for a long time. I didn't ever imagine I would become a journalist. I didn't plan to work in news. I didn't go to college to get a comms degree or anything of that sort. But I was working on a TV show called The Dr. Phil Show, which is a daytime TV show here in the States. And a reporter named Kurt Knudsen, who's a very famous tech reporter, met me and asked me to become his producer. And he sort of brought me into the fold. And so from there, that's where I began in news. And that, of course, then came full circle and brought me back to being the entrepreneur that, I've been since a young child.
Yes, well, that's amazing. So how was that experience as a producer on the Dr. Phil show?
That's a tough job.
It's very, and probably very demanding.
Yeah, that's famously a tough job for a tough show.
Yes. So you pioneered several social issue-based projects. Can you share with us and our audience more about this, and what was the inspiration and motivation?
So the most important of the projects was a docuseries that I did with the director of the Dr. Phil show at the time named Del Bigtree.
Yes.
And it was called The Homeless Real World. And it was a docuseries where a small group of producers and directors basically lived with a camp of homeless men and one woman who had survived a very terrible winter in Colorado.
Wow.
And half of the series was us going with them to live out how their day would typically, play out. And half of the time they would come with us. And it was incredible. And it completely changed the way that I view our brothers and sisters who live on the streets. And it also helped inspire a charity that's a big part of my life called Miracle Messages, where we help reunite people living on the streets with their long lost loved ones. So it's easily the most important thing that I've ever done. I did not go into it thinking, oh, I want to do a docuseries where I live with the homeless.
Yes.
I was at a startup called Mania TV that was an early competitor for YouTube and MySpace, and it also had a 24/7 live stream built on top of it. And this was an idea of several of the executives, and they had hired Del Bigtree from the Dr. Phil show to come shoot this on his hiatus. And it was very clear to me that he just needed help, and so I offered, but I did not go in thinking it would become what it did.
Okay, well, what an amazing, so very organic experience, I suppose, or organic process.
The truth is, almost my entire career has been just one organic domino after another. And, the truth is, I just try to surround myself with people that I think are smart and interesting. And I just sort of go with it. None of this is planned.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. So you obviously have your path set in a specific way, but you don't know how it's going to turn out, which is pretty exciting, I would imagine.
Yes.
So what have been some of your biggest lessons and learnings within your career? And I mean, you probably had multiple, but what stands out for you the most?
So I think as I sort of reflect on the past and where I am presently, it's pretty clear to me that the best jobs and the best careers are the ones that you create for yourself.
Yes.
There is no dream job out there that someone is just waiting to hire you for.
Yeah.
But if you think there's an opportunity, you can build that role. I've obviously done it for the most part inside of my own company, but even if you work for another company, it's clear to me that if you want to make a role that is exactly what you want to do, you have an opportunity if you want to be proactive and do it. But if you want to wait for somebody to figure it out and to put it, just throw it into your lap, it's never going to happen. I think that's the biggest lesson.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I say yes to a lot of opportunity, and that served me very, very well. I know people want to be mindful of their time and their bandwidth, but I think for the most part, people get into this sort of analysis paralysis, and
yeah, 100%.
yeah, and they don't progress because they're just so worried about what can go wrong. I'm always much more concerned with what can go right.
Yeah, and also I think what people also concern themselves with too much is what people think of them and the judgments that get made as well. So
people are afraid of the judgments others will make of them, but the truth is people also judge themselves quite harshly, and they convince themselves that there's a certain type of life or a certain type of career that they were supposed to have. And even when they achieve it, sometimes it doesn't make them happy, but they keep plodding along because they told themselves this is what they should do. And I think you're going to be happier when you live the life that makes you happy versus the life you thought was going to make you happy.
Yes, absolutely. So that leads me to talk about leadership or the lack of leadership. What would you say makes your leadership style different? And can you give us some examples? And how did you manage to sustain such a long career? And can you give us any examples?
Yeah, so I think lack of leadership is definitely more applicable to me.
Okay.
I hire people that are smarter than I am and more competent, and hopefully they're inspired to work with me and they enjoy what I've built. But for the most part, I am the lowest touch manager of any person I've ever met.
Yeah.
If anything, a lot of people that work underneath me are managing up and making sure that I'm on task and I'm on target.
Yeah.
I just don't have the bandwidth, and I have no desire to control people. I like to hire people that I sort of view them as artists, and I want to see what the artist is going to come up with, and I want them to be intrinsically motivated. And it takes a while to find these people. That's the hard part.
Oh, very much so. And also people that are going to commit and give the time and really work hard. You know, it's one thing to just put people in a position, but it's another thing to execute. So
that's right. And so I try to curate people that are going to treat Phantom as though it were their own company. And a few of the ways that you can do that is you have to pay top of market. I pay top of market, or, you know, some people might feel like I overpay for certain positions because I want people that are in the top 2 or 3% of competence and capabilities, et cetera. And then let them determine what their week looks like. And even before COVID, we had the full option for anyone to work full-time remote. If they want to work in, you know, the beach in Hawaii or Dubai or Japan or at home on their couch or in our office, and we have a beautiful office in Hollywood, completely up to them. And it also helps that I feel like I don't know if this is done with intention, but I have a group of people that are not only brilliant, but they are really, really nice and really, really fun, and they love to be around one another. I think if I put one negative person in the mix, everybody would want to leave. So I think that's when you build that sort of atmosphere, you sort of attract people that don't need you to be their leader. They can lead themselves.
Yes, absolutely. So you're an Emmy Award winner. What was this experience like, and how did this come about? And did this open other career opportunities for you?
So I joke that I accidentally won an Emmy. And the truth
I saw
is,
that.
you know, the truth is, I'm not wrong when I say that. And basically, I was working in news. I built out this big tech report, and I was more or less a workaholic, and I was always in a newsroom. And I built a syndication, meaning that it was on a bunch of different TV channels and a bunch of different news hours. And so I was always around the newsroom, and the Emmy was for breaking the news of Michael Jackson's death. And we had what's called a stringer, which, if you've seen the movie starring Jake Gyllenhaal called Nightcrawler, he played what is a stringer, which is essentially a cameraman who's out in the field trying to find interesting stories to record them to essentially sell back to news companies. And we had a stringer say, I think Michael Jackson's about to pass. And the news director of Channel 5 in Los Angeles, which is called KTLA, stormed into the newsroom to look around to see who's going to go on camera to break this news. And it was a ghost town because it was just an awkward time of day in between the morning news and the evening news. I happened to be there. We had a few anchors as well. And he basically asked me, do you want to go on camera and help us tell the story? And I said, sure. And I loved Michael Jackson. That was an icon of mine growing up. This was a very bittersweet day. And more or less, we just did hours and hours of breaking news around that story, which is one of the bigger celebrity deaths of all time.
Wow.
And so, again, did I do anything with intention to deserve that Emmy? Not at all. It completely fell in my lap, and that's that.
Gee, it's quite an amazing story. So, what have been some of your biggest highlights within your career?
I think the biggest highlight for me is that I was able to escape sort of the mass corporate mechanism and build a company where I get to do every project that I want to do. And I'm not sort of beholden to any repetition of projects that I'm not interested in. In terms of like specific highlights, I've gotten to do a lot of stories with a lot of people that were above my pay grade. I think in the tech space, in the news space, because our syndication had so many viewers and tech companies, especially in North America, viewed it as being so important to them. A lot of major tech companies sort of would roll out the red carpet for us because they knew our story was very consumer friendly. And if we were covering them, it was going to be good news for them. If they had something we weren't interested in, we simply wouldn't cover it. But if we were going to do a story on you, we were there to celebrate you. It's like if you watch, Anthony Bourdain or Guy Fieri on Food Network, if they go to your restaurant to talk about your food, they're not there to talk about how they don't like it. They're there because they're like, this food is great. And it was that similar for us in the tech space. And so I got to be there for the last 3 years of Steve Jobs' life at every single thing he did. And for many years, the Apple products I had were the products that he had given me. And getting to be that close to him and the team at Apple is a priceless experience.
For sure. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. So for me, I've done a lot of things and I've accomplished a lot of things for my clients and within news and within TV. And I just think that's one that always comes back to me.
Gee, that's incredible. So I want to obviously speak about transitioning into your entrepreneurial journey. Can you share with us more about this? And having worked in the world of broadcast and journalism, did this help you when you decided to embark on your own entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, so it all ties together, including what I just mentioned about Apple. So while I'm working in news, I built out this news report where, again, we're there to celebrate what these companies are doing, but in turn, they would essentially bring me behind the curtain and they would teach me everything about their business and they would show me all of the growth levers of their business.
Wow.
And it occurred to me that I could also tell my audience how to utilize certain platforms or certain technologies to help themselves or help their businesses. So very early on, I was doing stories like how to build your business using Facebook or build your audience using YouTube, purely for a broadcast news audience. And the TV network out of the UK called the BBC reached out to me and basically asked me to help them save a TV show that they needed to build a digital audience for. And without getting into too many specifics, it was a huge success. And they asked me to create Phantom. So I did not set out to create Phantom whatsoever. It was totally a byproduct of the sort of consulting work I was doing for the BBC. So all of this dovetailed together because had I not worked in news, I wouldn't have been purviewed to that world. And had I not started doing reports about it, that wouldn't have occurred to the BBC to ask me to consult with them. So from an entrepreneur into a journalist, right back into an entrepreneur very organically.
Geez, that's an amazing story. Wow. So touching on COVID-19 and how it's turned our world upside down, what have you had to do to adapt in these challenging times? And has this created other opportunities for you? And can you give us any examples?
So we were very early to recognize that the pandemic was coming. We knew last February of 2020, we knew what was going to happen. we're, again, already quite used to being work from home. So we already prepared everyone to just be at home. We expected that we would have several projects we were active with fall through the cracks because of the pandemic. And so as an example, we helped launch one of the first mask companies. We saw that there was going to be a shortage of N95s, and we incubated a company called Rapture, which is more or less a rewashable N95. It's not technically medical grade. We're not legally allowed to say it was medical grade, but essentially we tried to recreate an N95 and make it so that it was reusable instead of one-time uses. That's one example of an opportunity that sort of sprang forward during the pandemic. But the truth is, we've had our busiest year ever, as we've had clients who either needed our help to manage them through the crisis, or we had clients who were trying to figure out what were the growth opportunities during the pandemic. So it's been a horrible year, I think, on so many levels. But in terms of opportunity and the need for companies like ours to assist, I think our demand has probably never been higher.
Well, that's incredible. So as the founder of Phantom, which is an LA-based digital marketing and social disruption agency, can you share with us what is different about your agency, especially in such a competitive industry? And what do you believe you do differently that gives you the edge over your competitors?
So our specialty is to build recipes on how to build an audience and monetize an audience before others already sort of inundate and overwhelm a platform. We've done this. We've been early to Twitter. We were early to, I don't know if you remember that app called Vine. We built all of the early creators on Vine. We launched the first ever multi-channel network on Twitch. We did the first ever brand deal on Vine, Snapchat, and we've also been early to platforms like Clubhouse, et cetera. So one of the reasons why you hire us is we will help you weaponize and take advantage of these platforms, often in a very organic way, before it's occurred to your competition that they need to have an imprint there. So we're going to help you have that sort of first mover advantage on these platforms. And we're always looking 12 to 18 months ahead of most other agencies. We still do lots of the services that we did the beginning of Phantom, and you can have us come on to help you manage and build Twitter and YouTube and platforms like that. But what we care most about is building your relationship with your customer and finding the most creative and unconventional ways to help monetize that customer and to bring value to them. So I think we think in a much more holistic sense. We do a lot of what we sort of describe as global strategy work, where digital marketing, social media marketing is the tip of the spear, but we go much deeper into your business to figure out how can we align your sales funnel with your brand, with your operations. And that's why we've sort of very organically become what some people describe as an incubator. Some people describe it as a business accelerator. And so what will happen is we will help companies launch projects. If they're a large company, we might be helping incubate a project inside of Apple, as an example, or a news network or a TV network, or we may be brought in by private equity to help launch a new company altogether. So we're able to weaponize a lot of different growth levers and monetization levers instead of just focusing on purely social. I think that's a big difference. And the truth is, we're just this rogue pirate ship who is often brought in as a total outsider. I mean, when I look at like our list of current clients, we help build strategies for companies that we have absolutely no business being in that industry. But because our principles are universally applicable, you can show us any type of puzzle and we will find an unconventional, creative, efficient way to solve it.
That's incredible. I love it. I think it's amazing. So that leads me to the last two questions. What are the three key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs who want to pursue a career in broadcasting and journalism, and obviously in what you're doing now with Phantom? And what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered?
So advice for whether you're an entrepreneur or a journalist.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, if you have generic advice or advice for people that are looking to pursue a similar career in your industry?
Yeah. So number one, you don't need anyone's permission to do either of those. You don't need someone's permission to be an entrepreneur. You don't need someone's permission to be a journalist. If you want to go to college, especially with a graduate degree, that's up to you.
Yeah.
You don't need to get an MBA to get into the entrepreneurial field. You do not need to get a master's of journalism or communications to break into news. Those are pathways for some. I believe your time and your money is better spent just doing it. You want to be a journalist? Launch a YouTube channel, launch a newsletter, start covering a topic, launch a Substack, a Twitter feed, whatever it is. Just start doing it and iterating on it and researching it and teaching yourself and sort of, networking with other journalists, etc. But I think people feel like they have to go through the system to get these roles, and it's just not true.
Yeah.
No one's going to create that dream journalism job for you. They're not going to do it. But if you want it, you go make a YouTube channel, you build an audience, and if you can do it efficiently and effectively enough, the news world, the broadcast news world is going to notice you, and they're going to find a way to bring you into CNN or BBC or Channel 4. In terms of a legacy, I think I don't really think about my future legacy. I try to focus on how can I help the people that I care about today. And my father was very famously a helper and never met a stranger. He just didn't believe in that word.
Yeah.
And
That's beautiful. It's amazing.
I hope I get to continue to follow in those footsteps. There's a lot of things as a human I haven't figured out. I think one of the things that I'm very grateful for is if something good happens to someone around me, it feels like it happens to me. I don't get the feeling of jealousy. And so I love offering help and support. And I think I would just want to be known as somebody who tried to help and support and build up others as well.
That's amazing. Well, Darwyn, thank you so much for your time. So if people want to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
Sure. I think my direct messages are always open. It's easiest to find me on Instagram or Twitter. And I have sort of a strange spelling of Darwyn. My handle on all platforms is Darwyn's Theory, but Darwyn is spelled with a Y, Darwyn.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So hopefully we can have you back in the future to hear where you are in your journey. And I so appreciate your time.
Again, thank you so much for having me.